So, it's safe to say that the WRC isn't very exciting at the moment, mainly due to one driver dominating the championship. Now look, even during someone's dominant period there have been exciting moments, such as 2007, 2009, 2017, 2018 and even the pandemic affected 2020 season. But even during those seasons, it ended up being won by the same driver who would dominate for a long period of time. From 2004 to 2012, it was dominated by my favourite rally driver of all time, Sebastian Loeb. From 2013 to 2018, and then 2020 to 2021, it was won by fellow Sebastian Ogier, with Oyt Tanat being the only one to interrupt Ogier's run of titles. And it looks like, the way it is going at the moment, that Kalle Rovanperä will be starting his own dominant spell after winning both the 2022 and 2023 World Championships. And although there have been rumours that Kalle could do a part-time schedule from 2024, like fellow Toyota driver Sebastian Ogier, judging from his recent interview, I highly doubt that will happen. But only time will tell, I guess. And yes, before anyone brings it up, Tommi Mäkinen also had a dominant spell in the 90s from 1996 to 1999. However, the difference with his dominance compared to the other three I mentioned is that Tommi always had close competition during his championship winning years and never really ran away with it, unlike Loeb, Ogier and more recently Rovanperä. Before the Sebastian and Kalle dominant years, WRC was always too close to call, with the championship on most occasions going down to the wire. Which when the dominant period of Loeb started, which eventually led to the Ogier dominance and then potentially the Kalle dominance, it led to the amount of viewers that WRC got going down significantly. And one year that stands out for me, which was very close, and to date the last close season before the dominant spells happened, was the year that we are going to be talking about today, the 2003 World Rally Championship. The 2003 World Rally Championship would play host to the 31st season of the championship, with the season consisting of 14 rallies in total, which would span across 4 different continents, and a new point system, which saw the top 8 score points instead of the top 6. And in case anyone is wondering, WRC uses the same point system as F1, given it is an FIA World Championship. Going into the season, people were expecting reigning champion that season Marcus Grönholm to walk away with the title again, given he dominated the 2002 season thanks to the drivers around him tripping up on themselves. His team Peugeot were expected to win the manufacturer's title again, as they retained their lineup from 2002 of 2001 world champion Richard Burns, who was entering his second season with Peugeot and was determined to win the title back that he lost in 2002, and the third seat would once again be shared by tarmac expert Gilles Panizzi and Finn Harry Rovanperä, father of future world champion Kalle. However, everyone's eyes was focused around Peugeot's sister car brand Citroën, who were finally entering their first full season in 2003 after a couple of years doing a part-time schedule, essentially preparing themselves for their full debut. During those part-time schedules, Citroën, using the Zara, had shown a lot of potential and were tipped to be the dark horses ahead of the season. Only one driver would be retained from their part-time schedule in 2002, and that would be 2001 Junior WRC champion Sebastian Loeb, who had already impressed everyone with his shocking win in Germany the previous season. However, he would have strong competition from his two new teammates, which were two-time world champion Carlos Sainz, father of future F1 driver Carlos Sainz Jr., and 1995 World Rally Champion Colin McRae, both of whom had moved over from Ford after a frustrating spell there. Speaking of which, Marco Martin, after just missing out on his first win at the finale in Wales, essentially became the new number 1 driver at Ford as a result of both Colin and Carlos moving to Citroën. He would be joined by Belgian Francois Duval, who had done a part-time schedule with Ford the previous season, and Finland's Mikko Hirvonen, who would be making his full-time debut with the team. Although he won't feature much in this video, as given it was his first full season, he wasn't at the level yet that we would become used to in future seasons. The man who Marco Martin missed out on his first ever win to, Petter Solberg meanwhile, who in turn took his first ever win at the finale in Wales instead of Martin, would remain at Subaru alongside 4-time world champion Tommi Mäkinen, who was looking for a better season after a frustrating first year with Subaru in 2002. Armin Schwartz and Freddie Loitz would once again drive for the struggling Hyundai team, and Tony Geidemeister would be joined at Skoda by 1994 world champion Didier Auriol, who returned to the WRC after only doing one round in 2002 in an independent Toyota Corolla. Skoda themselves would start the season with the Octavia before switching to the Fabia halfway through. Mitsubishi, meanwhile, would not take part in the full championship for 2023 after coming off the back of a frustrating 2002 season, and instead would treat 2003 as a development season, only taking part in some rallies, with the likes of Alistair McRae, younger brother of Colin, Jani Passanen and fellow friend Christian Solberg, before making their full return in 2004. Interesting fact, the 2003 WRC game, dubbed WRC3, not to be confused with this WRC3, used the 2004 version of the Mitsubishi in the game, despite the fact that Rally Art, the team that ran the Mitsubishis, were using the 2002 car throughout their part-time season. Also in that game, Colin McRae isn't in it due to his partnership with Codemasters, who were making the Colin McRae games, with Citroën only having 2 drivers in the game instead of 3. Anyways, away from the video game world, the 2003 season was about to get underway, so let's go through that season. The first round of the season would take place as per usual at the famous Rally Monte Carlo, known for its icy roads which make the tarmac surface difficult for the drivers. The season didn't get off well for Subaru, as both Petter Solberg and Tommi Mäkinen would retire on the same stage as each other, with Solberg crashing out and Mäkinen unable to continue due to a brake issue, which put an end to his streak of Monte Carlo wins that he had since 1999. Elsewhere, Ford were off the pace and looked nowhere near challenging the front runners with their 2002 car, with the team waiting for their 2003 car to make its debut. Marco Martin would finish in 4th despite this scary spin he had during the rally, whilst Francois Deval finished in 7th. The rally would turn out to be a battle between the PSA teams of Peugeot and Citroën, with Marcus Gronholm looking very strong in the early stages, while Sebastian Loeb ended up being the guy that would battle Gronholm for the win, despite the experience of McRae and Sainz, who were keeping within touching distance, even with this mistake Sainz made. Burns meanwhile looked off the pace compared to Gronholm, and surprisingly tarmac expert Shil Panizzi also looked off the pace and was later forced to retire due to illness, which may have explained his lack of pace. This meant Marcus was forced to contend with the free charging Citroëns all on his own, and the pressure eventually got to him when, after he lost the lead to Loeb, he would make a costly error by hitting the side of a snowy mountain face, forcing him to pull over for repairs, and would end up scoring no points as a result. Not the start that Marcus was looking for in the defence of his title from 2002. In the end, thanks to Marcus's retirement, it would end up being a Citroën 123 in Citroën's first ever rally in their full-time debut, with Sebastian Loeb taking the first win of 2003, getting back the win that was taken away from him the previous season at Monte, with Colin McRae in 2nd and Carlos Sainz 3rd. After locking out the podium, many people were wondering, was Citroën going to dominate the championship with their very strong lineup? Luckily for those fans, that wouldn't be the case, as at the next round in Sweden, the WRC's only snow rally of the year, Marcus Gronholm would bounce back from the disappointment of Monte Carlo to take a dominant win ahead of fellow Finn Tommi Mäkinen, who also bounced back after his frustrating rally at Monte Carlo, whilst Richard Burns ensured a double podium for Peugeot in 3rd. The Citroëns meanwhile, despite showing some good pace earlier on, would end up tumbling down the order, with McRae finishing 5th, Loeb finishing 7th thanks to him clipping a snowbank after he initially led the rally, and Carlos Sainz finishing just outside the points in 9th. Round 3 would take the WRC fraternity to Turkey, the first ever time the WRC had visited the country. And the gravel rally would prove to be tough on the cars, with the Subarus of Tommi Mäkinen and Petter Solberg having issues with the rocky surface, which led to Tommy finishing down in 8th, while Solberg retired thanks to suspension damage. Harry Rovanperä would crash out of the event, whilst teammate Marcus Gronholm would have issues with his power steering. Sounds like something that would annoy Marcus in future seasons.
I'm fed up with this guy.
The power steering issues became so bad that Marcus even asked Peugeot if he was allowed to go home, Peugeot's response to this being, "Don't you even dare," and Marcus was forced to continue and ended up finishing down in 9th. Never change, Marcus. In the end, it would be a Citroën that would take their second win of the season, but it wouldn't be Loeb, as he would retire due to getting lost in between stages and eventually running out of fuel, leaving him stranded. Instead, it would be Carlos Sainz who would come through to take his first win as a Citroën driver, with Richard Burns and the Peugeot finishing second, which thanks to his consistency in the first 3 rallies would see him lead the championship, whilst Francois Deval would take his first ever podium in third in what would be the final round for the 2002 Ford, as their 2003 car was set to make its debut in the following rally in New Zealand. The 2003 Ford Focus would prove to be very competitive in its first ever rally, as Marco Martin would top 3 stages on the second day and even looked like he was going to challenge for the win until his engine gave up the ghost. Instead, it was Marcus Gronholm who became the first double winner of the season, completely dominating the rally after Martin retired, despite this mistake that saw his car upside down before fans at the side of the road pushed the car back on all 4 wheels. Richard Burns would make it a Peugeot 1-2 in second to keep the lead in the standings, whilst Petter Solberg, after a frustrating start to the season, would finally get his first podium of the year in third, whilst Loeb finished 4th in a rally that saw his teammates fail to score for different reasons. Then, at Argentina, Marcus Gronholm would build on his amazing win at New Zealand and perform one of the greatest comebacks in WRC history. After hitting a bank whilst leading the rally, which damaged his rear suspension, Marcus would storm his way back through the field, overtaking the Citroën of Loeb, who would later retire from the rally, overtake his 2 teammates of Rovanperä and Burns, and then when Sainz got a 1-minute time penalty for arriving in service too early, and when Marco Martin's Ford once again hit engine trouble, Marcus would come through to take his 3rd win of the season after an amazing drive. Sainz would finish second, whilst Richard Burns rounded off the podium in 3rd. The following round would take place in Greece for the Acropolis Rally, and it was in this rally that the PAC team's streak of wins would finally come to an end. After suffering 2 engine failures in the previous 2 rallies, both whilst in strong positions, Marco Martin would finally get some good luck, and despite his bonnet flying up, which impacted his visibility on one of the long stages, he would come through to finally take his first ever win, putting himself in the title fight. Carlos Sainz would finish in second, whilst Petter Solberg finished 3rd, after just missing out on second thanks to a mistake. Gronholm and Loeb would both retire from the rally, with Loeb retiring on stage 1 thanks to an engine issue, whilst Marcus Gronholm would retire on the roadside in between stages due to a fuel pump failure. Colin McRae would also have issues in this rally, but unlike Loeb and Gronholm, was able to finish the rally, albeit down in 8th. Then, at Cyprus, Richard Burns' consistent points, which was a contributing factor in him leading the standings, would come to an end when his engine seized due to dirt getting into it. He wouldn't be the only one, as Marco Martin, after winning in Greece, would also have dirt getting into his engine, although his retirement would be down to oil pressure. Ironically, his teammate Francois Deval would also retire on the same stage with the same issue. To add to the retirement, Marcus Gronholm would once again retire for the 2nd rally in a row when his prop shaft didn't want to play ball anymore. With Burns out, it left his 3 other title contenders, all of which were in a Citroën, with a golden opportunity to catch up. McRae would finish in 5th thanks to a few mistakes, nothing new there. Sainz would finish 4th, whilst Loeb would beat his more experienced teammates to the final podium spot. Harry Rovanperä, meanwhile, was looking set to take his 2nd ever win before gearbox issues prevented that from happening. He would still finish the rally in 2nd, but it was a cruel way for him to lose the rally. Instead, it would be a 5th different winner of the season, as after a frustrating start to the season, Petter Solberg would keep out of trouble and finally take his and Subaru's first win of the season, Petter's 2nd career win in total. And with Richard Burns not finishing, it meant that Solberg had catapulted himself into the title fight. However, the next rally was expected to favour Citroën and Peugeot Gilles Panizzi, as it would take place on tarmac. The second half of the season would start in Germany, which would only be the 2nd time the country would host a World Rally Championship event. Despite being branded as the king of tarmac, Gilles Panizzi was surprisingly way off the pace, as he finished outside the points in 10th. Marco Martin was once again in the hunt for the win, but yet again mechanical issues prevented him from doing so, this time gearbox issues. He was able to continue and recover his way back to 5th, but given he won the last 3 stages, it was once again a question of what if. Carlos Sainz and Petter Solberg would make mistakes throughout the course of this tricky rally, with the pair of them finishing 6th and 8th respectively. In the end, it became a fight between the leading Peugeots of Marcus Gronholm and Richard Burns and the Citroën of Sebastian Loeb. Richard Burns eventually fell away from the battle, so instead it was just between Loeb and Gronholm, like at Monte Carlo. Gronholm was putting pressure on Loeb and looked set to overtake him until a small mistake ended his hopes. As a result, it led to Sebastian Loeb taking his second win of the season and essentially affirming himself as the new king of tarmac, taking the title away from Gilles Panizzi. Loeb would move up to 4th in the championship, 10 points behind championship leader Burns, who finished 3rd. Next up was the fast and famous Rally Finland, and people were expecting Marcus Gronholm to pick up the win, which he needed if he was to retain his title from 2002. However, despite showing great pace, his rally would come to an end thanks to his front wheel ripping off. Luckily, he would still be within touching distance of the title after the rally, unlike Colin McRae, whose championship chances would take a huge hit after crashing out on stage 16. With Gronholm out of the running, it was Marco Martin who would take full advantage and take his second win of the season, putting himself back in the title fight. Petter Solberg would take second place after a close fight with championship leader Richard Burns, while Sides and Loeb finished 4th and 5th respectively. At Australia, Marcus Gronholm's championship chances would take another dive, as he would beach his car at an uphill hairpin, ending his rally as a result. Marcus now needed a miracle if he was to win the title. Both Colin McRae and Carlos Sainz would finish 4th and 5th respectively after being in a fight with the Subaru of Tommy Mäkinen, who before the rally had announced that he would be retiring from the sport at the end of the season after another frustrating season. Richard Burns would take another 3rd place, however the main focus was on the battle for the win between Petter Solberg and Sebastian Loeb, which after overtaking Loeb on the final day, Solberg would eventually win the rally and stamp his authority on Rally Australia, winning the rally by over half a minute ahead of Loeb in 2nd and Burns rounding out the podium in 3rd. This moved Petter into 2nd in the championship and put him within 7 points of championship leader Richard Burns. Martin would have also have been in the fight for the win had it not been for his strap, which was holding his spare wheel, snapping on one of the stages, which after he tried to fix by putting rocks and stones to hold the spare wheel in place, he would end up getting disqualified, as what he did was declared illegal, putting a dent in his title hopes. The next 3 rallies would take place on tarmac, with all 3 expected to favour Loeb. The first of these 3 tarmac rallies would be San Remo in Italy, which would turn out to be the last time the Italian round was held at San Remo, as from 2004 it moved to the gravel surface Sardinia. Before the rally began though, news broke that Hyundai would be pulling out of the WRC with immediate effect, with the intention of returning to the sport in 2005, which never materialised. After being consistent all year, Richard Burns' championship would start to unravel, as he was strangely off the pace in this rally and finished down in 7th. Petter Solberg meanwhile was looking strong throughout the rally before he suffered a fuel issue on his way back to service, putting an end to his rally. Another man who would end his rally would be Marcus Gronholm, as thanks to changeable conditions he would smash into the side of a mountain face, which would give him a loose wheel, practically ending his title hopes. In the end, as expected, it was Sebastian Loeb who would come through to take a comfortable 3rd win of the season ahead of Gilles Panizzi, who thanks to a late tyre choice was able to move up to 2nd. Marco Martin would have got 2nd place and was looking set to fight Loeb before receiving a 1-minute time penalty for leaving service too late on the final stage, ending any hope he had of winning the rally. Next up was the French island of Corsica, and it would play host to one of the greatest individual performances in WRC history. Before the event began, Petter Solberg crashed his Subaru during shakedown, with his mechanics just scraping the barrel to get it fixed in time for the first stage. Home favourite Sebastian Loeb was once again expected to win the rally, and it was looking good for him until in changeable conditions on day 2, he lost control and got stuck for 10 minutes, ending any chance he had of taking the win and finished down in 13th. This handed the lead to Francois Deval and was battling with Carlos Sainz to hold on. But whilst those two were battling each other, Petter Solberg, after suffering gearbox issues during the first day, was carving his way back through the field, and thanks to his Pirelli suiting the changeable conditions compared to the Michelin runners, he caught up and passed both Sainz and Deval to take his 3rd win of the season. It was an amazing drive from having his shakedown crash and having gearbox issues on day 1 to charge his way through the field and take victory, with Petter crediting his mechanics for giving him the win. Sainz beat Deval to 2nd, and with Burns having another miserable rally and finishing down in 8th, he now took the lead in the standings, with Solberg also overtaking Burns on a countback of wins, whilst Gronholm and Martin were still just in the title hunt, despite Gronholm finishing 5th and Martin, after losing the lead in the early stages thanks to a spin, having a scary accident, which he was lucky to walk away from. The penultimate round of the season and the final tarmac rally of the year took place at Rally Catalunya in Spain. Home favourite Carlos Sainz was looking strong initially to challenge for the victory, however he would later go the wrong way in setup and he would drop down the order, finishing a lonely 7th. Petter Solberg was once again looking strong on tarmac and was leading initially until an alternator issue saw him leave service late, landing him a 50-second time penalty. Once again Richard Burns was off the pace, and thanks to a mistake on stage 19 he would retire from the rally, meaning he would need a miracle to win the title at his home rally. Once again, Sebastian Loeb was looking strong on tarmac, and despite both Martin and Panizzi closing him down due to them battling each other, he was looking good to take the win. However, towards the end of the rally, the heavens opened and both Loeb and Martin had selected the wrong tyre for the final stages. Panizzi on the other hand had selected the right tyres, just like at San Remo, and quickly overtook Martin for second. Then on the final stage, and with Loeb still struggling on his tyres, Panizzi was able to thrash him on the final stage by a massive margin to snatch the victory off his fellow compatriot to take what would turn out to be his final victory in WRC. Loeb as a result finished second, but with Sainz down in 7th and Burns retiring, he now took the lead in the standings going into the finale. For Martin and Gronholm, however, their 3rd and 6th place finishes respectively in the rally officially ended their title hopes. Petter Solberg, meanwhile, thanks to the changeable conditions like in Corsica, was able to get himself back up into the points on the final day to finish in 5th, keeping his title hopes alive. This meant that going into the finale in Wales, Loeb led the championship on a countback of wins ahead of teammate Sainz, while Solberg was only a point back in 3rd and Burns a further 4 points back in 4th. This meant 4 drivers had a golden opportunity to take the title at the finale. However, sadly, it would only become 3. On the 4th of November 2003, 2 days before Wales Rally GB was supposed to begin, Richard Burns suffered from a blackout whilst riding in a car with Ford's Marco Martin, and he was forced to withdraw from the rally, being replaced by Freddie Loix and ending his title hopes. He was taken to a nearby hospital where his family, including his wife at the time Zoe, and his co-driver Robert Reed, who was travelling to the rally when this occurred, met up with him at the hospital. Richard was diagnosed with astrocytoma, a type of malignant brain tumour. This forced him to step away from the WRC throughout 2004, where he was expected to return to Subaru to replace the retired Tommy Mäkinen and partner alongside Petter Solberg, and then eventually the entirety of 2005 as well. Throughout 2004, he would receive numerous amounts of treatment before having surgery in April 2005, which was believed to be successful. However, it was becoming clear, according to his then wife Zoe, that the tumour was taking its toll on Richard's health and memory, with the cancer sadly spreading to the other side of his brain. In August 2005, a fan day was set up to show off Richard's garage collection. However, due to his declining health, Richard was unable to attend. Then, sadly, on the 25th of November 2005, just over 2 years after his diagnosis, and on the same day that George Best passed away, Richard Burns sadly lost his battle with cancer. His death saddened the entire motorsport community, as given this was during a time when social media had only just started, people were expecting him to make a return. He is still to this day, at the time of uploading, Britain's last World Rally Champion, and to this day, Richard has never been forgotten. Wales Rally GB would once again play host to the final round of the 2003 Championship. Seriously WRC, please bring back the UK Rally. The focus going into the rally was the title fight between Sebastian Loeb, Carlos Sainz and Petter Solberg. However, early on into the rally, this would become a two-way scrap, as Carlos Sainz would crash out of the rally, once again ending his title hopes in Wales. This meant it was between Loeb and Solberg, and both would duke it out for the win like they did in Australia. However, unlike Australia, Loeb just couldn't find an answer to Solberg's pace, as despite leading early on, Solberg would grab the lead back on stage 4 and would continue to lead up until the final stage. Behind them, both their teammates of Tommy Mäkinen and Colin McRae were both fighting for the final podium place, and it would be seen as an end of an era, with Mäkinen retiring from the rally at the end of this event and McRae taking a sabbatical, which would later turn out to be a full retirement from the WRC. Although if it wasn't for Colin's tragic death in 2007, there was a chance he could have returned with Subaru in 2008, but tragically, this never happened. Rest in peace, Colin. Going into the final stage, McRae was chasing down Mäkinen, doing everything he could to grab the final podium place. However, his podium chances would sadly come to an end, as a puncher forced him to stop on the stage and change it, handing the podium to Mäkinen on his final rally. McRae would finish 4th, which thankfully for him was enough to give Citroën their first manufacturer's title in their first ever season as a full-time manufacturer. Now the focus was on the driver's title, and Loeb brought the car home to finish ahead of both Mäkinen and McRae by a massive margin. He had done all he could, now he just had to hope that something would happen to Solberg for him to win his first world title. However, this wouldn't happen, as even though there was a championship at stake, Solberg was still pushing and brought his car home to set the fastest stage time and take his 4th win of the season, which as a result of beating Loeb meant that Petter Solberg became the 2003 World Rally Champion. Despite not leading the championship throughout the entirety of the season, and despite a terrible start to the season as well, Solberg's amazing second half of the season was enough to grab the lead in the standings in the round that mattered the most, and with it win his first and what would become his only World Rally Championship. He would be the last World Rally Champion not to be called Sebastian until 2019 when Oyt Tanak won his only world title to date, and then again in 2022 with Kalle Rovanperä. It would also turn out to be Subaru's last world title as well, before pulling out of the sport at the end of 2008 due to the financial crisis at the time. For Loeb though, even though he didn't win the title, it was an amazing season and one that impressed everyone in the WRC fraternity. Thankfully for the Frenchman, he didn't let this defeat get to him, as a year later he would bounce back and win his first world title. And then afterwards, the rest, as they say, is history. That's why he's the GOAT, everyone. For Carlos Sainz, it would end up being the final time he would be in the title fight, as he would retire from the WRC at the end of 2004. He would make 2 more appearances in 2005, replacing the struggling Francois Deval, before handing the reins back to Deval and going back into retirement. After WRC, he oversaw his son Carlos Jr.'s karting and junior Formula career, which would eventually lead to his son making his debut in Formula 1 in 2015 with Toro Rosso, alongside future world champion Max Verstappen. And to this day, Carlos Jr. is still racing in F1, now with Ferrari alongside Charles Leclerc, even though they are with a team that has clowns in their department. The 2003 season will go down as one of, if not the greatest season in WRC history. A season that saw 5 different winners driving for 4 different manufacturers, with the pecking order being too close to call to make a prediction on every rally. It also saw a season where consistency still allowed you to be a title contender, courtesy of the late Richard Burns, who had garnered a reputation for doing that in his career, which was the reason he won the 2001 championship with Subaru. If we ignore what happened with Colin McRae in that rally. It also in a way saw a passing of the guard, as the likes of Carlos Sainz, Tommy Mäkinen and Colin McRae, drivers who had defined an era of rallying during the 90s, handing the baton over to the likes of Petter Solberg, Sebastian Loeb and Marco Martin, although only one of them would create a legacy for years to come. Guess which one? It's still to this day probably the last best year WRC had before it went to a number of dominant periods under drivers that I mentioned towards the beginning of the video, which in a way is quite sad. And it also goes to show that even though in my opinion the greatest ever rally came from one of those dominant periods, again link in the card on the top right, it just shows how much the WRC has fell off in terms of popularity, which I hope one day it will recover. But given it's currently having difficulty attracting manufacturers at the moment, that might not be for a long time yet, unfortunately. Like with my Rally New Zealand 2007 video, if you have never seen any of the 2003 rallies, I recommend you go and watch the official highlights on the WRC YouTube channel. The 2003 World Rally Championship, one of the greatest and closest seasons of all time. Hey, it's me again. Just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone for the amazing support you have given on this channel. Since I started this channel in September, it has been an absolute blast, and the amount of subscribers the channel has garnered over these last 2 months has been mind-blowing to say the least. I really didn't expect this many subscribers so quickly, so thank you very much, I really appreciate it. I also wanted to take this time to say that I will be taking a week break after this video has been published, as although I've enjoyed making these videos every week for you guys, like with other content content creators who also do the same type of content I do here on YouTube, it can get draining from time to time, especially if you're doing big projects like this one. So I'm going to take a week break to recharge the batteries and then come back in 2 weeks time with another video. I do also have video scheduling plans for 2024 to make life a bit easier and a bit flexible for me during the new year and beyond, so that I'm not constantly burning myself out, but I'm not going to announce those plans until the new year, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I also do have plans to also take a break during the Christmas and New Year period for obvious reasons. Anyways, thanks again for your amazing support guys, take care and see you in 2 weeks for the next video.